Whether it's Main Street or Wall Street, he's got you covered. Now, more Larry Kudlow.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm Larry Kudlow. This is the Larry Kudlow Show. Let's get right to it. We are honored to have as our guest Congressman Paul Ryan of Wisconsin, chairman of the Budget Committee, former vice presidential candidate, one of the very, very best thinkers in the Republican Party. If I may editorialize, I hope he runs again, but that's not the subject of the interview. Paul, welcome back. You know, I was thinking about your new plan to solve and ameliorate poverty, and I just came upon one of my favorite quotes from the Gospel of Matthew, okay? The Gospel of Matthew. Jesus is warning to feed the hungry, welcome the strangers, clothe the naked. What we do to the poor and destitute, the least of these, my brethren, we do to the Lord himself. You are trying to help the least of these, my brethren. Tell us what your central thoughts are, please.
Well, hey, good morning, Larry.
Good morning.
Nice to be with you. That's precisely the idea, and I'm trying to do it in a way that's effective, that actually works. I'm trying to do it in a way that brings out the best in our society and puts the role of the government in a proper place so that we can bolster, instead of crowding out, what we commonly call civil society, good works, communities. And I would argue that one of the casualties in the war on poverty is that the federal government took on a role that ended up displacing and crowding out and trying to replace a lot of our local communities, a lot of civil society. And one of the inadvertent causes on this war on poverty, which is a war that was 50 years in the running, tens of trillions of dollars, and we had the highest poverty rates in a generation. Deep poverty is the highest since we've been measuring it. And so, by any measurement, it's not working the way it should have or should be working. And so when you take a look at the federal government's role, you have to look at, what can we do better and how can we fix this? And so I've spent the last 2 years basically digging into these programs, traveling the country, and listening to people who are actually really successfully fighting poverty, who are looking at people eye to eye, person to person, making a difference in their lives, and systematically moving people from depression, from dependence, to lives of self-sufficiency, to opportunity, getting them from welfare to work. And so what we want to do is make sure we replicate that. And so we're proposing a number of reforms, but all of which are tailored at getting a person back on their feet and getting the government to not displace these good local works in the communities, but to help them. And do it in a way that we measure and focus on outcomes so we get the best outcomes.
You talk about opportunity grants, Paul
Right.
Ryan. Opportunity grants, which, as I understand it, would really move the authority and much of the funding from the federal government, which probably knows nothing, one size fits all, to the local governments and the state governments. Can you briefly describe your opportunity grants?
So we did welfare reform in 1996. That was one program. It was very successful. It moved kids out of poverty. It was the biggest social change at the federal level we've had in a generation, and it was very successful. But it reformed one program. We have dozens others. And so we say, let's take 11 welfare programs and collapse them into one funding stream and give states the ability to take that single funding stream and create an opportunity grant whereby you can customize and tailor-make support for a person based on their particular needs to move them from where they are to where they need to be and where they want to go. And the whole purpose of this is, when you look at all the formulaic and bureaucratic rules and programs from the federal government, it ends up, and you know this issue well, it ends up giving a high marginal tax rate to people who want to go from welfare to work because of all the rules and the regulations and the confusions. They in many cases lose more in benefits when they take that extra step to go get a job. And so it disincentivizes them to move out on their own. And so you want to get at that issue. More importantly, the federal government displaces a lot of groups that are doing a good job locally. So what we say is, have states collapse these funding streams so that you can customize aid to the person based on their need, to get the able-bodied person to welfare to work, and make sure you break up the monopolies of service providers. Right now, you go to just welfare agencies to get a bunch of different programs. You don't really talk to anybody. You just get the benefits. And that's about all it is. And it's very confusing, and they disincentivize work. And so what we're saying is, you can go to your state welfare agency for your single stream, opportunity grant, but they also in the state have to give options, other service providers. It could be charities like Catholic Charities or for-profit institutions like America Works, which does this, and they are measured on their performance. You're testing the results. They are measured on whether they actually get people out of poverty into work on their plan. And so you might customize a benefit for one woman who needs transportation and child care, for one guy who needs, addiction counseling and job training, and another person who has different needs. And so you customize it, you tailor-make it, and a person basically signs a contract. It's called case management.
Right.
You manage their case per their need.
So this is the civil society part, too.
Exactly.
It's not just... I'm out there, Paul. Anytime somebody asks me, I go out and raise money for the Catholic Charities up in Connecticut. I've done it a bunch of times. Jan Dillenschneider's husband's Bob Dillenschneider is very active in that. I'm very active up there. But that money goes directly to what you're getting at.
Exactly.
It's some of it's food, some of it's training, some of it's work habits. You know what I mean?
Right.
Sort of teaching, I don't know how to say this, but teaching character and discipline.
It's all of that. So actually we worked quite a bit with Catholic Charities on this proposal. I was informed by a lot of what they do, and they were doing it with their own private donations. And just think of how much more you could scale it if the government resources are here to play. And so the purpose is the government shouldn't be the front lines. The government shouldn't be dictating this on the ground. The government should be the supply lines, the rear guard, and it should be providing the resources that these good works can actually produce outcomes to customize to people's needs, because poverty is complex. People have different problems. Some of it's situational. There was a death in the family, an illness, or you lost your job and you need a helping hand for a temporary period to get back on your feet. Some of it's generational, systemic. There are deeper issues, addictions, or you have no family support, you name it. And so you need to be able to customize it, and you have to do it in a way that emphasizes work, that emphasizes that it's limited in duration, but customized to a person's needs, so that it has accountability, it has expectations. If we're going to take hardworking taxpayer dollars and apply it to this area, which we always have and we will, there's got to be some accountability in exchange for that. And that accountability is, you want this aid to work and be effective. And so get behind the institutions that are doing that and then measure them, hold them accountable, the institutions.
So you've got work requirements.
We can replicate the success all over the place.
You'll have work requirements. You'll have time limits.
That's right. That's correct.
And I think that's important for people to understand. These
have
are
to
not
have that.
Just open-ended. Now, one of the things you mentioned a moment ago, and this is one of my favorite pet peeves, frankly, I think for both of us, going back to the great Jack Kemp. And by the way, one of the great things about your initiative, you actually got out into the rest of the country.
Oh, it's wonderful.
And to the Spanish groups, the African American group. That's what Jack always taught. That's what the Republican Party has forgotten. I always talk about that.
I think that's right.
I love that. I just love that you're doing it.
I learned it from Jack. I mean,
Yes.
you and I are old friends of Jack.
Yes.
I learned it from Jack, and I just thought to myself, you know what? We lost this. Ever since welfare reform, which was in the late 90s, we have atrophied as a party. We have ignored this space. We need to get back in because we have fantastic principles and a lot of energy and good ideas to bring to this. Because what we're doing, the status quo is not working. And if it was, I'd be defending it, but it's not. And so I'm trying to find a way of reforming it. And when you get out into the communities, Outcry in the barrio in San Antonio, or the boot camp in downtown Indianapolis. I mean, it is incredible. We have these great programs in Milwaukee. We have this one high school program that's been replicated to 12 high schools, where in one case we had 14 gangs in an inner-city high school, and there are no gangs now 2 years after the program got started.
Wow.
Because we have mentors who have credibility, who were from gangs, who saw the error of their ways, who are talking to these young kids, who are in the schools saying, don't make the mistake I did. Here's how you get your life together. Don't listen to that person. Don't be violent. Don't do this. And it's working. And so you want to get behind these great works that are happening, and you want everybody pulling in the same direction, the charitable sector, the private sector, the public sector. And the problem with the war on poverty is the government has inadvertently displaced that, and it's basically told the common taxpayer, pay your taxes, this is government's responsibility.
Right.
If there's poverty or problems in your community, you don't worry about it. Just pay your taxes, send your money to Washington, and we'll handle it. Well, that's not going to cut it anymore. It doesn't work, and it has resulted in isolating the poor from our communities. We need to reintegrate people so that everybody in this country can find opportunities, so that everybody can find the American idea, which is it doesn't matter what your birthright or birthplace or background is, you can make it in this country, and we've got to reconnect people to that notion.
Your staff has me on a short. They have both of us on a short leash because you're a busy fellow
I got to go to the Rock County 4-H Fair this morning.
Let me just ask you quickly, Paul, a couple last details. One thing that interests me a lot, you want to double the earned income tax credit, I guess for people...
childless workers. It's right now very, very low.
Right.
This is an old Uncle Milton,
Right.
Uncle Milty idea from Milton Friedman. If you read Hayek, he proposes a similar thing. We basically say cut corporate welfare, cut wasteful spending. I've identified where we should do that, and bring childless adults at a better place by doubling it to about $1,000. What the evidence shows us is it does pull people into the workplace. 20% of young people who are single between the ages of 21 and 25 are not working or even in school. They're just not engaged in society. And the EITC, which needs some reforms, which I think in the Ways and Means Committee we need to tackle, should take its effectiveness and apply it to these young adults who are falling through the cracks in society, who are at the prime of their lives, who need to get pulled back into the workforce. And making work pay, giving more rewards for work is clearly something we ought to do. And it helps us with this marginal tax rate problem we have.
Right, because if you make, as I understand it, Paul, I went on the Tax Foundation website, the earned income tax credit phases out at $20,000 a year. So if you get a job, let's say the person goes into your program, you get a job, you work your way up the ladder, you get raises. I guess if you go past $20,000, you lose the earned income tax credit. Now you're going to be pushed into almost a 15% marginal tax rate, and you may lose certain benefits along the way.
The marginal tax rate gets as high as 80%.
Right, so it ain't worth it. It ain't worth it to work.
You combine EITC with other welfare benefits, the 11-week collapse into one funding stream that can be more flexible per person's needs. You'll have single moms making $20,000 with 2 kids who will lose 80 cents on the dollar just by going to work.
See, that's incredible.
Because of the lost benefits. That's what we're trying to fix here. Because it's a rational decision. It's a disincentive to work. Obamacare just makes it worse.
Casey Mulligan of the University of Chicago has written about this. He says it's one of the causes of this long recession that we're engaged in. Paul, do you do anything with the child tax credits? Is that necessary?
We didn't do anything with the child tax credit. The only part of the tax code I touch is the EITC. As you know, I'm a huge tax reform I'm a fan of tax reform, and that to me is a subject for tax reform, which I didn't want to bite off more than I could chew with just this proposal. All
right, great stuff. A whole new approach using the state and local levels on many different areas, making it, I'm going to just say, making it pay to work, making it pay to have discipline, making it pay to have local counseling. I hope I do you justice. Again, Paul, the Gospel of Matthew, it's the least of my brethren. Those are the ones we have to look out for. You're doing it. Congratulations.
Thanks, Larry. Have a good one.
All best today. That was Congressman Paul Ryan, chairman of the Budget Committee, former vice presidential candidate, with some innovative new anti-poverty ideas to help the least of our brethren. I'm Larry Kudlow. This is the Larry Kudlow Show. We will be right back.
You're listening to the Larry Kudlow Show.